All right, I think we'll get going. Welcome, everybody, to the September 20th Advisory Committee meeting. As always, the public meeting requirements are the meeting of the ARPA Advisory Transformation Committee are public meetings as defined by the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act and should follow these guidelines. As this is a public meeting is held virtually, it will be recorded and made available to view on the DDS website. Committee members must make a good faith effort to state their name and title, if applicable, each time they speak during the meeting. If a committee member would like to speak, please raise your hand and one of the co-chairs will acknowledge you. There is no public comment portion to this meeting. Members of the public are able to join, watch, and listen only. All right, so next is the approval of minutes from the 9/6/22 meeting. Are there any discussion? Don't see
Keith,
Yes.
Keith, it's Steven Siegelau. Did you separately email the minutes?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm not sure I got them.
Friday.
I know there was a problem with me being on the mailing list. Okay, I don't want to hold things up, but.
Yeah, Steve, they're also on our website. You can always find them on our website under the ARPA pages.
I see them. Thank you.
And Stephen, maybe we could talk after because this is a second time we've had issues. So I'm not sure if it's going into your spam or whatnot,
Okay.
but they are being sent. I'm not leaving you out.
No problem. No problem. Thank you very much.
All right.
Keith, motion to approve the minutes. Kevin Bronson.
We have a second.
Second, Barry Simon.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motions are the minutes are accepted. The next on the agenda is the advisory committee email update. After this meeting, I will be sending out some directions. Everyone in the advisory committee had received an email about the email. And what I can do, let me share my screen for a second. Once people get on, they will come to a section and for their teams, and this is what they'll see. And you can move to the files and you'll be able to see, you'll be able to upload any documents and we'll be able to all see them together and share whatever we need to do as an advisory committee. Barry, I think it was you that had discussed having something like this. Is this something you think that will meet our needs?
Yeah, Barry Simon O'Kill. If everybody has equal access to Teams, then Teams is a really nice platform to be able to share, upload, move, all those kinds of things. So I know my recollection was that you guys were going to figure out whether we, as not part of the state system, had equal access to the Teams platform.
Yes, and everyone should be able to see everything that I just put up on the screen. So that shouldn't be an issue going forward. The only potential issue is that sometimes family members have some trouble getting into Teams. And I just recommend to email me and we'll try to work through any issues going forward. So
Keith, I'm sorry, it's Steven Siegelab. I just went on my Teams. I use Teams at work, and I just don't see the access that you showed on the screenshot on the share screen. We don't have to take up the time of the committee, but maybe we could speak separately.
Yeah, what I'm going to be doing is after this meeting, sending out specific directions to each member. There's certain things you have to do to get into the state of Connecticut Teams. So you wouldn't be able to get into it as yet. You have to go through the
link to it. Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I know in the last meeting you said you needed to get this set up for the advisory committee before you could do it for the other committees, but is the plan to have access for all of the committees to have a repository for information?
Keith, I will let DDS. Are you looking to have one for your individual and family separate from this one, or are you looking for every committee to have one to go to?
Shannon Giacovino, DDS Ombudsperson. I'm looking for my committee to have it, but I think it would probably not be a bad idea to ask the chairs of the other committees if they would like that as well.
Yes, we can work on that. I think the plan is to get this one up and running and see how well it works, and then move forward with the other ones. Okay, next we have business between meetings. This is an issue. Wynn had a question that he wanted to bring up last meeting, and we weren't able to get to that, and he emailed us, but we could not put it in the meeting into the minutes because it wasn't discussed. So when this was about the data collection and the outreach on individuals' experience prior, during, and after transition, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just think that it's important that in the work that this group does is to have our eyes on the people that are being supported, and therefore I'm suggesting that we get data, impressions, whatever, from the people that are involved in some of the transformation, before, during, and after, their transitions, as an important part of it, because that's what we're all trying to help do. But I'd like to have the data collected and the data distributed so that we can all learn from it.
Right. We appreciate that, Wayne, and we did think it was important to get it into the minutes. Actually, we just couldn't put it into the last minutes.
This is Peter Mason. So when you're saying, I'm trying to think about the before. If providers will be doing their own plans, and then we'll be figuring out who that's going to be at that point. Are you looking at something before we even do anything, or this individual specifically that will be transitioning?
Hi, it's Wynn Everts. I envision it to be if somebody's transitioning from a CLA to an in-home support, residents changing residences, it'll start when the planning begins around that individual, and then it will, go through the process with them. I don't anticipate these transitions are going to necessarily be easy, and therefore I think it's worthwhile getting the data from them and
Okay.
and making and using it.
All right, I understand now. I thought you were on a different tact. Okay, thanks. This is Peter Mason, by the way.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry, you have your hand raised.
So, yeah, Barry Simon, I guess, Win, following, or if I'm following along with you, is it the, actually the overall collection of data before and after in order to figure out whether this transformation, so to speak, is a success? Okay.
Yes,
So-
whenever it's yes.
Yeah, so for me, that it is really thinking that there's a number of data points that we should be thinking about, not just for individual, but going back to once the vision, so to speak, is laid out, if it truly is are more people being served with more service options, and then for anybody who transferred within that process. So there's a couple of different data points there that I think we could be collecting that would be helpful to know whether this was a success.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Stephen, your hand was raised.
Yes, Stephen Siegel. I exchanged some email with Peter, but what I'd like to see is some survey of the provider organizations who would do IHS about their willingness to take on new clients who are transitioning out of their current arrangements with the incentives, and what will happen when the incentives dry up. I think we identified in the previous meeting that the incentives will run out after several months. So what's their willingness of the providers to take on new clients even with the incentives, and what will the impact be when the incentives run out? How will the providers continue to provide the services once the incentives run out? So I think it's really important to know that, so we don't get into a situation where providers take on the people because of the incentives, and then the incentives run out, and now they run into trouble continuing to provide the services. So I think it shouldn't be too difficult to survey the providers. I think DDS probably knows who all the providers are, and ask them those questions.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Shannon, your hand was raised.
Shannon Jacobino, DDS ombudsperson. So kind of going back to the conversation with Wynn's point, is the thought, Wynn, that we want to look at this information to start to develop some best practices around helping people to transition, and specifically around the different models that, are used less often now?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. It's also the acknowledgement that these transitions are probably not going to, again, they're not going to be easy. And if our goal is to build a broader array of supports in Connecticut for people, I just want to make sure we start with the idea that we're going to collect a lot of data about what we do to understand what worked in particular situations and what doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. I mean, Stephen, to your point about incentives, I mean, I think it all basically boils down to rates. So.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry, your hand is raised.
Yeah, and that was going to be the question I was going to ask, was Wynn's point there. And Stephen, I don't know if you meant or what I took from your statement was that the rates are the rates, and I'm hoping that we're able to talk about, if we're transforming the system to be offering more service options, then creating sustainable rates for all service options, as long as the bottom line dollar, I guess, stays, somewhat consistent, unless there's a willingness on OPM and DSS's part to allow for this not to be a zero-sum game. But even if it is, dealing with sustainable rates for the entire service continuum that gets created ends up being part of the possibilities that could sustain the system going forward and could create incentives if those rates are driving, you know, the direction that we want, which is more service options.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Michael?
Yes, Michael Beloff, parent. And I guess in looking at the incentives, there's was two types of incentives that were proposed. One was when you move someone out associated with that person, so the agencies were given a little bit extra money to get that person into a new environment. And then there was a secondary incentive when there's a open slot in a CLA, as in if that CLA is being closed, that the agencies weren't losing money by supporting individuals who were left. I think it's more important about the first one to understand how that's going to work and agencies being able to work with that than the second. And then secondarily, in looking at transformation, my understanding is there are agencies that are already moving individuals out from group and residential environments into less restrictive living. And they're doing it without incentives. Not that we shouldn't offer the incentives because we have money, but if there are organizations that are already doing this, they should be surveyed and find out what and how they're doing it to understand the issues that they've faced, and how they've kind of done it without extra money, or just what it takes to move someone out, since it seems there are at least one organization I know of is already doing this, at least somewhat. Probably not as extensively as we're imagining as part of this program, but we should take advantage of agencies that are already moving folks into less restrictive environments. Look at how those folks are supported, and that may be a start in designing how we might want those less restrictive environments to look like. Because that's ultimately, it's hard to move folks out unless we know what it's going to look like when they do move out.
Thank you, Michael. Keith Lavalette, DDS. Kevin?
Kevin Bronson, DDS. I would encourage the co-chairs of the subcommittees, the day and the residential subcommittees to rather than just, I guess, talk about this conversation here, maybe put a survey together and send it around separately. And the reason why I'm proposing that idea is because in my own subcommittee, we did sent around a survey, you know, because I'm part of the DDS engagement committee. So my first thing, what we did was we sent around a survey asking staff about some similar types of questions, stuff that they might look for specific to my committee, right? Specific to so we can focus what our work is going to be going forward. And it sounds like some of these questions that you have might be facilitated through some data work done at the subcommittee level.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. I believe Kathleen is next.
Thank you. Kathleen Stauffer, the ARC Eastern Connecticut. Just to clarify something that was said, as the leader of an agency that's been moving people into community housing for about 4 years now, because it's a prescribed part of our strategic plan, I think we've found that where the person in the group home wanted to live in an apartment, that was not necessarily something that was problematic. It's been our experience that DDS was fairly, was quite supportive of that. One of the real challenges is the current availability of housing that we've worked with multiple agencies with to create, I think, 5 slots for people with IDD to move out of group homes and into those slots It's just a very complex situation. You've got multiple silos that are working hard to try to speak with one another. So I don't see the problem so much being that providers have managed to do it without extra money. I think we have had extra money, but I think the separation of government departments and entities and organizations kind of unwittingly conspires to make it a more complex process. And maybe what I would advocate for is that we work on systems that allow different departments to work more seamlessly together. And I know that Barry is often saying that with regard to models of support, because they exist in other silos, and why reinvent the wheel? So it's not, I think everybody's willing. It's just, we've got to all adopt the same language of change and transformation. And that is, as somebody who's been in communications for 30 years, it's easier said than done, even when people have a willingness to do it.
Thank you, Keith Lavalette, DDS. Stephen, I think you had your hand raised again.
Thank you. Stephen Siegelau, parent. I just want to follow up on things that Barry and Michael said. First, I agree very strongly with Barry's comment about sustainability. I think that's consistent with what I was trying to say before, which is that moving people out with incentives doesn't help if it's not sustainable. So I think sustainability has to be a key focus of what we're doing. And then as far as Michael's comment, I think there are agencies out there who have been successful in moving people into IHS community-based settings. My daughter has IHS services from an organization that provides those services to over 60 people. So I think we really need to reach out to those organizations that have successfully done this and really examine how they've done it and how it's successful and what their needs are, so that we can get a sense of what will work going forward for all providers who want to provide these services.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. I believe that's it with the questions. The next agenda item is Transformation Initiative and the Deloitte Consultants. Peter, I believe that's you.
Thanks, Keith. Peter Mason. So listening to all what you're saying is kind of leads me into this agenda item. We have contracted, where we're just about to contract with Deloitte, who will be assisting us with the transformational plan. After listening to what you guys had to say and speaking with leadership, and knowing that there's a timeline that we're trying to meet. So what we're going to move on is a dual path. And so that everybody understands, we're going to look at working with those agencies now who want to volunteer to move forward, using the incentives that we've developed. And at the same time, Deloitte will be doing the following. So they're going to be doing this in phases. And the first phase is they're going to be assessing our current system. They'll be looking at policies, reimbursement methodology, and our service delivery plan. They're going to be researching 5 other states that have been working on or have started the transformational system change plans. They're going to be gathering input from stakeholders. They'll be looking at other state agencies and getting feedback from stakeholders. They're going to take all that, and they're then going to Hold on for a sec. I gotta get my cursor over here so I know what I'm doing. From that, they're then gonna go into a design phase. So they're gonna design different options that will allow us to assist the team as to how that would fit into the DDS system. They'll be creating an outcome-based payment program using a metrics within the system based on moving forward with the transformational system. They'll develop a transition plan that's focused on operational changes. They'll then present that to the department, at which point we will then work with them to come up with the plan. They'll then be the plan phase with providers in terms of the organizational restructuring plans. They'll be developing implementation guides for providers. They'll be doing stakeholder communication pieces to this, and they'll be doing training with providers. And then the last part will be the implementation part of assisting providers as to how to implement it. So I think, and one of the things that they are going to look at is our rate system. And that gets a little complicated because I think for those that don't know, we are on the docket for DSS to do a rate study of all our rates. So Deloitte's probably going to start theirs first. So I have to work with DSS to make sure one doesn't do something against the other. So hopefully that whatever Deloitte does helps assist the DSS plan. So there'll be pieces that they will look at in terms of the rates. And then, as I said, DSS will also be doing a full rate study of all our services and stuff. And so that's kind of what that's going to do. And the other, so we're going to be working with those agencies that want to volunteer. And so that we can start now, because as I've been saying all along, timing is an issue. So what we're going to do at our next meeting, we'll have Deloitte come to this meeting and present there and to have like a kickoff with that process. Any comments?
Keith, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry, Keith Lavalette, DDS. Wynn, you would be first.
I just, Peter, thanks for that explanation. Hi, it's Wynn Everts, the ARPA Connecticut. Thanks for the explanation. Just for clarity, is the organizational restructuring plan the same as the transformation plans that
Yes.
providers are going to do? Okay. Thank you.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry?
Yep, two things. One is, Peter, are you going to be sending that out to us, or will that be some place where we can see like what the scope? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want, this is Peter Mason. I just want to make sure that we nail this down with
Yep.
Deloitte before we send it out to everybody.
Okay, that sounds good. I think first I forgot to say Barry Simon O'Kill. And then second, just to kind of reiterate the researching the rates from 5 other states that are under transformation. I hope it's researching the rate methodology, not the rates, because if they're looking at rates, we should be probably number 3, behind Hawaii and California when it comes to the cost of providing services. So, okay.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Katie? Katie, you're muted.
You're still muted. This is Peter Mason. Katie, can you put it in the chat?
And Katie, if you go under more and settings, you might be able to see if your mic is a mic that somehow or another is not one connected right now.
Katie wrote, do you have timelines / target dates for each phase?
That's what we're working. This is Peter Mason. That's what we're going to be working with Deloitte. I don't have those off the top of my head. I know that they have come up with that. I know a lot of this, they know the timeline we're under. So a lot of this is going to happen over the next 3 or 4 months. We're hopefully going to be working. Hopefully we'll be in the transformational plans coming up in January or February from providers.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry, is your hand raised again?
Oh, nope.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Is there any other questions?
This is Peter Mason. I know we keep talking about rates, and I know rates are important. But I just want to reiterate, this is not a rate committee. And so there needs to be some format for that discussion, but that's not what this discussion is. This discussion is about transformation. And I know those may go hand in hand, but this committee is not here to come up with every rate and all that. We're charged with moving forward with the transformation piece to this. Wherever that happens, and as I said, it's going to get complicated with DSS and having their rate study. I think I just want to make sure people understand that this is not a rate committee.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Wynn, you have a question.
Will the outcome-based payments make a difference in how money moves through DDS? I'm going back to sort of the Rentschler Field conversation a few years back.
So we know that this is the outcome payments. This is Peter Mason. The outcome payments are something that CMS is starting to, I don't want to say push, but starting to make us move in that direction. And we know DSS, our sister agency, has developed an outcome payment piece to this. So our idea or our thinking with this is that if we're going to do an outcome payment for the services that we do, we need to make sure that they do what we want them to do and that they are an incentive to move in that direction. And so we don't want to tread on this lightly. And how that gets implemented and whether that will shift dollars and funding from our consistent funding to something different, we don't know. So we don't want to jump into anything until we have the full picture. And so that's why that's part of this with Deloitte, is to see how this is all going to fit, and that they'll make a recommendation, and at that point it will be leadership will take a look and see how to proceed.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry, your hand is raised.
Yep, thank you. So I want to, I guess for the record state, I agree with Peter that I understand that that this is not a rate setting committee, so to speak. And it's just certainly the need to, and I hope that the transformation is about identifying alternative services that add to the continuum of care options, and that we're also able to look at things like, because we're a provider that provides DMIS services, where in our residential setting, we have integrated day programming that happens, and within that, an example of the requirement to provide 40 hours of habilitative or rehabilitative services, and showing, that you're keeping people from either progressing or not regressing as a component of whatever their treatment plan is, then you get your payment as long as you meet those, outcomes. And if you're not providing those kinds of services, then you don't get your payment. So again, just recognizing that there are places in the state where much of what we're shooting for as, options that are showing value to the system and creating service options. But with that, there are different kinds of rate structures that allow those systems and those services to happen. But for me, yeah, this is about creating more service options. But to that end, we also need to make sure that we create a payment structure that allows that to happen. So thank you.
Keith
This
Lavalette.
is Peter Mason, and just to follow up, Barry, I that's the stuff that we're trying to get to. I think we've learned that one model does not fit everyone. And, we have to make sure that what we set up will meet as many people as possible for the department that we serve. And so that meets the needs of all the various individuals we support. So one model is not going to fit all, and so we need to figure out what that continuum looks like, and who would be qualified or not qualified, who would what requirements are for for the individuals, and who would fit where, and so some of that stuff is we would need to take a look at.
Yeah, and recognizing that Barry from Hotel, that we're also under, the home and community-based services rule. There's just all kinds of different requirements that we need to keep in mind as we're developing service options.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So, yep.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Peter, it's you again, interim residential incentives.
So at our residential meeting, and we had a lot of discussion regarding the incentives. And a lot of the discussion wasn't so much on the incentives themselves, it was on the various pieces to them. And so the committee has recommended and approved the incentives as interim to allow DDS to move forward with the dual system we have. So we now have the residential piece together. We'll be looking for the same kind of setup with the day, so that those agencies that want to volunteer to move forward will know what those incentives are. We can start now coming up with some more detailed structure to that, and so we can start moving forward.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, any questions regarding the residential incentives? Kevin?
Kevin Bronson, DDS. Are those located under the subcommittee's website?
Are the incentives underneath there? Kevin, this is Peter. I'm not too sure. I'll have to find out. I know they're part of the minutes. I thought we put them. Are you saying they are, or are you saying we should put them there? I can't. I don't know.
Kevin Bronson, I'm just asking where they are located.
I think they're as a separate unit there, are they, Keith?
I don't see them, so that's why I just wanted to know, because we're talking about them. I just figured something if people wanted to look at them.
Yeah, we sent them out we discussed them at our last meeting, so everybody got a copy of those. But I think your point of having them online, we should. I thought we had, so if not, we will get that corrected.
And Kevin Bronson, DDS, but you said that they would be in the I guess the 13th agenda or the meeting, the minutes
For the advisory, yes.
for the advisory, not the day. Okay.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Kevin, they may be in the advisory section in the first meeting. There was a PowerPoint presented of the incentives. I believe it's there. I'm not entirely sure, though. I'd have to double check.
This is Peter Mason. If not, we'll make sure we get those out there.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. The next item for discussion is a discussion from committee members on items identified by families or individuals that may interfere with moving to an alternative day or residential setting. Again, why money is a main factor, what other issues would get in the way.
So this is Peter Mason, and I get a little worried sometimes with some of these committees that it becomes very focused on providers, and I know providers are a big part of this, but I want to make sure that we have a vehicle for families to provide their insight or their input as to what issues that they see may happen with transformation. So I want to kind of keep this on the agenda each time and get feedback from family members, committee members that have talked with families, so that we try to keep this in the forefront, that there's a reason we're doing this. And this isn't just for us to shake things up. This is to make sure that we're providing the supports to as many people as possible, and the supports in a community in a community-based setting.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Shannon?
Shannon Jacobino, DDS ombudsperson. I think, you know, a big obstacle for families is that there's a fear about losing funding. And I think that this kind of goes back to some of what Barry's talking about, or has been talking about there isn't really a perception out there that people have the ability to move through the services as their needs change. I think our system has always been one where people feel that the group home is the ultimate because that's the maximum amount of support and that's the maximum amount of funding. And if you can get it, you have to grab it because you never know if you're going to get that chance again. And so I think that we have to really be able to communicate with people in a way that helps them to understand that as people's needs change, the level in or your support needs change, that, you know, you're going to get the supports that meet your needs. And so I think that's a big one.
This is Peter Mason. Shannon, that's an excellent point. I know that while not always successful, I know that DDS has strived to do that. I know that a lot of times that DDS will try to provide as much support in the existing area that they're in to see if that will help. But I know that's what they strive to do. They're not always successful, and I think it's a good thing that we need just to figure out how to communicate that and how to institutionalize that as well.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, Greg.
Hi, this is Greg McMahon, DDS. Shannon and I are both part of the Individual and Family Engagement, we're chairs of the Individual and Family Engagement Committee. And one of the things that we are hearing from some of the family members on that committee is concerns because they just don't know enough about what service options there are. You know, if we say supportive housing is this great thing, they don't really understand both the benefits and the responsibilities and challenges of each service that we make available to people. We're just spending time now educating our committee on what each of the services are, and it's enlightening for them because they have heard the names of things, but they haven't really heard what they are. So I think one of the efforts of our committee will be to produce something that helps to explain what our services are and what the benefits of each of them are and what the challenges are so that families can make educated decisions. Right now, some of the things we're throwing at them, they either haven't heard of or they don't understand because we haven't explained it well. So that hopefully will be a byproduct of this committee, but I think that is one of the concerns family has, is that they're stepping into an unknown and they'd like to know a little bit more about what they're getting into.
Yeah, this is Peter Mason. It's exactly why we put together the individual and family engagement, was to how do we communicate this out? And it's the same reason why we did this with the DDS staff as well. I think we have a lot of great supports out there. I just don't know if we've communicated as well as we could to individuals, families, and some of our DDS staff. So I think, you know, how we get these messages is, I think messaging is going to be a real important piece to this. With that being said, we had to take a step back in terms of the communication consultant that we were looking at. We had to, we've kind of put that out again. And so hopefully we'll have somebody on board by the end of October. It's unfortunate that it took a step back, but we're still trying to move forward because we do believe that we need more assistance in terms of communication from the department on this initiative.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, Shannon.
Shannon Giacovino, DDS Ombudsperson. This is a suggestion, to address what I raised, and I think also a concern or a fear that many families have when there are changes to the system, particularly families who have loved ones with higher levels of need, that somehow their loved ones are being left behind. And I think that it's really important for DDS to communicate to families and individuals, but also to staff, how what we're doing here fits within the broader vision of what DDS sees as the future of services for people. So, I think it's really important for people to have context and to hear directly from leadership about why these changes are occurring. They're not just occurring because we have this funding. They're occurring because this is what should be happening for people who the department serves, that people should have more choice and they should have more options, and that supports should be more person-centered, and that these are steps that we are taking to get there. So I think there has to be some context communicated to the entire community for what we're doing here.
This is Peter Mason, and I know the commissioner is going to be going out and doing a bunch of family forums, and I'm sure this is going to be part of those topics.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Michael. Michael, you're on mute.
Michael Beloff, parent. Sorry about that. I think, and as a parent, I think, when we look at changes to the system, I think from a kind of a day supports option, I think parents are going to be, their initial thought will be excitement because they're getting new things for their kids during the day and learning and so forth. I think when you look towards changes to residential, the first reaction from families is going to be fear that I'm going to be losing something. And I think it goes to communicating what residential should be. As a parent, and I've been on a board of one of the agencies for 20 years, I've always thought of residential as on or off. Either you have residential services, which means you're in a group home, or you don't. And I think it's important for families to understand it's a continuum. And for us as in transforming services, to be able to describe what that continuum is and how that works. And I think we should be using language that families are used to hearing. I mean, when I've talked about things, I've said less restrictive environment, which is the language that any parent with a child under 40 knows from IDEA and the way they receive services in the district. And I think looking at that and I think if you tell a family you want the kids to be in a less restricted environment, they get excited. If you tell them you're taking away their group home and putting them in the community with some supports and technology, they get scared. And I think describing it in the right way will be key to getting parent buy-in to allowing their child to move out. And again, I'm not trying to take away the agency of individuals in group living environments to want to live on their own. But ultimately, it's the parents we're going to have to convince. And I think we have to think about language in terms of talking with them.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Stephen?
Stephen Siegelau, parent. I just want to say, as a parent with a daughter who's been receiving services for 15 years, I don't recall ever getting any communication from the DDS about service options or anything else. So I would welcome more communication and more engagement as far as what's available and what the options are and so forth. And, as I've said, I'm very grateful for all the support that my daughter has received, but, I would love more interaction with DDS, more information about what's available and so forth. Because right now, for 15 years, the only interaction I've had with the DDS is just our biannual, semi-annual meetings, review meetings where we review my daughter's progress and so forth. So thank you.
Keith
And
Lavalette,
Steve, this is
DDS.
Peter Mason, and I think that was one of the reasons we wanted to put together the individual and family engagement committee. In the old days, they used to have a DDS newsletter that would go out to families. That became prohibitive because of postage and all that kind of stuff, and so then they try to do it online. One of the things that we've looked at is like an email database for families, and the problem is that people change emails so quickly. To try to keep that up to date, you'd need a full-time staff, and so I think some of that stuff we're trying to figure out how to do that in a new technology world, and I don't think we've got there yet, but that's kind of the stuff. But I know that's the reason for that committee, was to help us. How do we better communicate what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how this will be beneficial to people.
Thank you, Peter. Stephen Siegelau. That's really important and, would be welcome, I'm sure, by many parents.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Barry?
Yeah, so I guess I want to respond to Michael and to Stephen as far as excellent points. And I know speaking, from our DEMA services that we provide, having that continuum, our, discussions with parents are always that, whether your child is in an ACT team, a supported apartment, a supervised apartment, a residential setting, you can sleep at night knowing that your child is going to move up or down the system based on their needs, and you don't have to worry about them not getting services. And we always find that that's a really comforting way to deal with the issues and concerns of parents who, of course, have nothing but the utmost of worry, concern, and want for their children. And so because of the nature of within the mental health system, mental health changes over time within the IDD world. Certainly as people age, sometimes where they are in that aging process, they can still be developing more independent skills, or later in life they could be losing independent skills. And so being able to move in the continuum and have parents not worry about that is always the goal, and and is comforting to parents. So yeah, how we lay out the continuum of care options and get that message out there is going to be really important.
Keith Avalette, DDS. Stephen, do you have another question? You're on mute. You're good?
I'm sorry, I forgot to remove my hand after my previous comment.
All right, thank you. All right, is there any other questions or concerns for the good of the committee? All right, our next meeting is October 4th. We're hopeful to have Deloitte on board for that meeting, so it'd be important to be in attendance. And other than that, I guess we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks.
Good meeting.